Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining Reformed Niger Television. My name is Deji Yesufu. I'm reaching you from the city of Ibadan, Nigeria. We have a very special program today where we are coming to talk about or talk to Nigerian and Nigerian audience on why Kamala Harris cannot and should not be the president of the United States of America. We have a very, very distinguished guest today in our on the studios. We have Mr. Curtis Hill. I believe Mr. is fine. Mr. Curtis Hill. And in a moment, I am going to introduce him very, very properly. But thank you very much for joining Reform Niger Television. I want to plead with you that if you're watching us live, please share our handle to all the social media platform where you're reaching us from. If you're on Twitter, please share the program there. If you're on Facebook, please do the same. And for those of you who are on YouTube, you can share the YouTube link to your various social media handle. The program shouldn't be more than an hour, and hopefully will be done. So I want to say thank you. Thank you, Curtis Hill, for joining our broadcast today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deji. It's good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So in a moment, I'm going to read your bios. You're a very important person, and we do not take it for granted at all that you're here. So I am going to read your bios. Curtis Hill is a former Attorney General of the state of Indiana in the United States of America. Curtis was born in 1961, so makes him 63 years old today. In 2024, Curtis ran for the office of governor of Indiana, but he lost at the Republican primaries. Curtis is the youngest of 5 children born to his parents. His father served in the United States Army. After graduating from Eckhart Central High School, Curtis enrolled at Indiana University, Bloomington, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Marketing and immediately after his Doctor of Jurisprudence from Indiana University School of Law. It is also where Curtis met and fell in love with his wife, Teresa. Faith brought them together, and faith, that's the gospel, Christian faith bound them to one another for the rest of their lives. After law school, Curtis moved back to Elkhart to begin practicing law. Not long after, he and Teresa, a school teacher, were married. Together, they are proud parents of 5 children. Curtis also has a love for martial arts, having earned a second degree black belt in Taekwondo and a black belt in Hapkido. Curtis is a Republican, a Christian man, and also a black man. I think he is best positioned to explain to a Nigerian audience, and I believe to the world, why Kamala Harris cannot be the president of the United States. Again, I want to say thank you very much, Curtis, for joining the broadcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So let me go straight to the questions that I have for you. I've had them written down, so I knew I was going to be very occupied and there was going to be some kind of rush. So I wrote the questions down. So the first question is, Curtis, you are a Christian man. How and when did you feel the call to join politics? Because I believe that politics is a calling, and you must have felt at some point that you should leave law and serve the Lord Jesus Christ in the field of politics. So at what point and what led you to make that decision?
Well, thank you for once again for having me on your program. And I think the call of politics is important to have, and it's important to go in for the right reasons. I was a young lawyer in my hometown, and I was a deputy prosecuting attorney. And I took that job very seriously. It was a person who reviewed cases to determine who would get charged with offenses, who would get prosecuted for offenses. And I was in that role for a number of years as a deputy prosecutor and assistant prosecutor. And from a political standpoint, there was more that I felt that I could do that office needed, and I wanted to take that leadership role. So I ran for prosecuting attorney. I didn't view it much as political as much as it was a necessary function of the community. to have the proper person reviewing cases, making proper charging decisions, and the whatnot. I was very successful in that endeavor and won by a significant margin and became the full-time prosecuting attorney in my home community. We created very many innovations in how we prosecuted criminals, how we investigated crime. We set up a crimes against children division. We had a very serious anti-drug effort and a unit that I put together to fight and combat drugs. And we were very vigilant against violent crime. I did that job for 14 years and felt a calling to move to a state level. And so I ran for Attorney General for the state.
Okay.
And I was elected Attorney General in 2016, the same year that Donald Trump was elected as president.
Okay.
And primarily fought for freedom, defending freedom, and working as the state's top lawyer.
Wow, that's interesting. So essentially, you have actually worked in the public space for how many years now? 14 plus 2016 to 24.
Well, actually, I've been in public service for over 30 years now. I was
Wow.
14 years as a deputy prosecutor. I was 14 years as the elected prosecutor, 4 years as attorney general.
Wow. Wow. That's very interesting. And for a country where public service is not that rewarding, you have actually been serving people for many years. That
Well,
is, I mean,
it's rewarding in terms of the work you do, but it is a strain on the family.
okay.
As a practicing lawyer, there were some opportunities that we had to forego in order to move into public service. So it's a real
Okay.
sacrifice for families, for sure.
Yeah. 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 I can understand that. All right. My second question. Why should the world, particularly a Nigerian audience, be aware of the Kamala Harris presidency? Besides your commitment to party politics, why do you think the Democrats will not augur well for the United States and particularly for the world? So that's like two questions in one. Nigerian audience, what do we think about? I mean, how should they view a Kamala Harris presidency, and why are the Democrats just not good for the
Well,
world?
well, like it or not, the world is impacted by whatever happens in the United States. And it may seem arrogant to say that, but it's true. It's the leading nation in the world. And so every nation, not just Nigeria, every nation on earth should have a concern about who's at the top of the food chain in the United States government. And what the international community needs at the United States is someone who can be a full level-headed partner in maintaining freedom throughout the entire world and defending freedom. And so it's very important to identify and look at the characteristics that a person makes up. You mentioned the issue of why should the world be concerned. We certainly want to make sure that the person has the right sensibilities from an international standpoint, from a diplomatic standpoint. We are facing violence and disruption all over the globe. What's happening between Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. Those are concerns not just for those individuals or those nations involved, but for the rest of the nations on Earth. And the United States plays a key.
Thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, is that a question?
Yes, I was going to play a video after this, so I have the video all set up. But I didn't know it was going to play right away. Just continue, sir.
Well, in terms of Kamala Harris and her role, one of the chief concerns I have is her role in disdain for life. I think it's important for the world community, for the United States, for the Christian community to have a president who supports and endorses life. Kamala Harris has made her position quite clear. She calls it reproductive rights, which is another way of sanitizing the idea that they're into killing babies.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at in the United States, where we had the case of Roe v. Wade, which for 50 years sanctioned abortions in the United States. In that period of time, um, over 60 million unborn babies were killed by abortion. Now, what's interesting about that is 13% of our population in the United States is black. Yet 38%, a disproportionate 38% of our abortions were performed on black women. That means that over a 50-year period, 22 million black babies were killed by abortion. Now, to put that in perspective, in 1960, the United States population, the black population in the United States of America, was 18 million people. 18 million. So from 1973 to 2023, we had 22 million blacks aborted, killed by abortion, more than the entire population of Black America in 1960.
Yeah.
Anyone that would support abortion in the United States is certainly not recognizing what that's done to the black community. Currently, we have about 47, 48 million blacks in the country. 22 million is about half of that. So if we had not killed 22 million blacks in that 50-year period, the population of Black America would be at least double at this particular juncture, which would increase political significance. It would increase heritage and legacy, wealth opportunities, all across the board. So this is the big perspective, the big picture is what we need to look at when we're deciding who's going to be the leader of the free world.
Yes. I think my greatest concern about Kamala Harris is actually competence. It's competence. When Donald Trump was shot at some months ago, in that very first incident where the bullet passed through his ears, I took time to look at the security details, those ladies around her. And what I saw was, if a young boy of about 20-year-old could breach the American security, if Russia or China or any of America's enemies, even North Korea, had tried, if they had tried, I can't imagine where we are, where would have been. So competence is the issue here. Or what do you think? Do you think this lady is competent for office?
Well, I think competence is a measure that we have to look at, and you're hitting it right on the head. The Secret Service's policies under Joe Biden, who is Kamala Harris's entree into the White House, is really at that's what we have to look at in terms of what happened in Pennsylvania in July. As you mentioned, a 20-year-old nobody with no real experience was able to get within a few hundred feet of the president, not only get close to him, get a shot off and hit him. And it's but for the grace of God that that Trump wasn't killed. Now, that's incredible. And as you pointed out, what if one of our adversaries had been making the effort? And as I pointed out as you were talking, Iran actually has individuals in the United States, according to intelligence reports, in the United States looking for opportunities. So the basis of this incompetence comes at what our priorities are, and the priorities of the Secret Service has been to enact inclusion policies versus excellence and competence in recruiting and staffing personnel. In other words, it's more important to have agents who look a particular way or fit a particular identifier or profile other than extreme competence and excellence. And that's what we get with the entire left. It's identity politics. It's choosing people because it looks right, it feels good, but not looking at what America has always been about, which is being the best. You want your Secret Service to be filled with people of the highest caliber, highest quality. What's the number one responsibility? Protect the president. How do you do that? With extreme competence. It's more important to have the absolute best person in the job rather than to have a person who fits a particular identifier as either a female or a minority or some other classification, some other qualifier. That has to stop.
Exactly. I want us to watch this video. It's about 30 seconds. Just watch it and get your views on it. It's the comment that Barack Obama made about black men voting in the coming election. Let's watch.
You're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
Okay, so he answered by saying that that is not acceptable. So, when you saw this video, what were your immediate thoughts? And if you have opportunity to respond to what's his name, Barack Obama, what would you say to him?
Well, I respect the fact that Barack Obama was president of the United States, but who the hell is he to sit there and tell men who they should vote for based upon the color of their skin? I mean, it's this idea that he is chastising black men for exercising their own independent will and political ideas is ridiculous. It goes back to when Joe Biden said, "You ain't black if you don't vote Democrat." This whole idea that blacks are still on the plantation or still owned by a particular party is insulting. It didn't move the needle. It also shows an act of desperation. The only reason Obama's out there chastising black men is because there is real data, real polling data that indicates that black men are breaking for Donald Trump, that they've had enough of being lied to, of being spoon-fed crap, and they have an independent voice. And that's what we want. And to be clear, I'm not saying this because I'm encouraging black men to all jump in the Republican Party. I think that all people should maintain their political independence and make sure that they don't blindly be led by either party. Do your history, do your homework, look at what the history of the parties has been, and look who's actually speaking and reaching out to you. Donald Trump said a few years ago when he was running for office, and he was at a group speaking in front of some blacks, and he said, "What do you got to lose?" And those were really true words, because for 60 years in the United States, Black America has been given lie after lie from the left under the guise of propping us up, helping us. And what's happened is the Black community has gone down and down and down. I'll give you a couple more stats. Back in the early 1960s, fatherless homes in the Black community was at 25%. We're not proud of that number, 25%, but 25% was not that far off of the greater white community at the time. Today, that number is closer to 75%. That's a triple the jump. Now, the single biggest problem in the Black community is fatherless homes. Well, that number jumped since 1965, since the Lyndon Johnson Great Society, since the social welfare programs of the Great Society, not before. So even after slavery, after Jim Crow, we still saw Black families intact. We still saw Black men leading their families, taking care of their children. And then after we had the mid-60s, the 1965 Civil Rights Act, and the Great Society policies, we started to see a decline in the family structure because of government abuse, government growth, government influence. And what's happened is the Black community has become so dependent upon the government, and according to Barack Obama, dependent on him and his message. He has the audacity to think that he can go out and make a statement and chastise and belittle Black men and get them to act the way they're supposed to act. I think that's insulting.
Yeah. And hopefully that has stood against him, because there have been lots of negative reaction to that.
People are pissed.
And yes. In our private discussion before this interview, you gave me a history of blacks and voting history. The Republicans used to be something I can't remember. Do you mind telling the audience some history with regards to blacks, starting from the 19th century?
Absolutely. And it's important to understand our history so we know where we're going.
Yes.
The Black political history really begins at the end of the Civil War and with Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Um, with the end of the war, it became the end of slavery. We had our 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were related to ending slavery, creating citizenship for former slaves, and voting rights for former slaves. So those are very important aspects of our political history. And at that time, it was all driven by the Republican Party. So, as you might imagine, the 2,000 or so blacks that ended up serving in political office in the last part of the 18th century, excuse me, of the 19th century, were all Republican, all Republican,
Wow.
and remained Republican largely until the 1940s, and I'll get to that in a minute. So what then happened was in the South in America, there was a backlash against the black leadership and political offices. So what happened was Southern governments, governors, sheriffs, police, etc., started initiating policies to keep blacks from voting, poll taxes, literacy tests. The long and short of it is just around the turn of the 20th century, most all the political gains by blacks in the last part of the 19th century had been eliminated. So all of those black office holders were gone. Now you had blacks who weren't able to vote. And this was further magnified by the presidency of Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat, was a former president of Princeton University in New Jersey. But as a Democrat president, Woodrow Wilson was the one who officially segregated the federal government and the United States Armed Forces. So that became law to have segregation. So Jim Crow segregation became sanctioned by the federal government and was certainly widely practiced in the South, while de facto segregation was practiced in the North. Now, throughout this entire time, blacks who were able to vote were voting Republican. Now, what happened was in America, we had the Great Depression in the 1930s, and then we had Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, became president in 1936, I believe. And when he became president, he was in office for almost 4 terms. But during his presidency, a dramatic thing happened. There was an opera singer, a black woman, who was supposed to sing at the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they refused to let her sing in the Constitutional Hall because she was a black woman. And Eleanor Roosevelt, the president's wife, resigned her membership in the Daughters of the American Revolution, and she orchestrated a concert in front of the Lincoln Memorial for the black opera singer, and that was such a significant event in the black community. It led to a lot of blacks switching from Republican to Democrat.
Was Roosevelt Democrat?
Roosevelt was a Democrat. Franklin Roosevelt was a Democrat.
Okay, so that was where the exodus began.
That's where it largely began, and then it culminated into the 1960s. For example, Dwight Eisenhower, I don't remember the exact percentage, but Dwight Eisenhower, who was president before John Kennedy, was a Republican, and he was the last president to get a significant portion of blacks voting for a Republican president. After that, you had John Kennedy, who got large support from the Democrats or from blacks, and then you had Johnson, and Johnson benefited from having followed Kennedy and having the Voting Rights Act happening under his watch, the Civil Rights Act happening under his watch, notwithstanding that those measures had large Republican support, but Johnson was a larger-than-life character, and at that point, you saw blacks voting Democrat nearly 90%, and it's been almost that way ever since.
Same, yes. But I noticed, I checked the stats, and I noticed that in the last 4 elections, from the time of Barack Obama till now, the number of black men voting Democrats has been reducing. It keeps getting smaller and smaller, and it's likely that in this election you will have a lot more black men vote Republican.
It's getting smaller and smaller, but it's still not where it needs to be. What I find fascinating is if you talk to many people in the Black community, um, and you understand their value system is one way. For example, Blacks in America are the largest church going body that exists. More Blacks go to church than any other ethnic group on
Yes.
a regular basis. Blacks are solid Christian, believe in life,
Yes.
support the pro-life movement, support family, are very pro-family, and yet um, approximately 90% of Blacks vote Democrat. And it's because there's been a system in place, uh, like Barack Obama just exhibited, where there is guilt and influence pushing to create this idea that well, you're not Black enough if you don't vote Democrat, or you somehow lose your Black card if you don't stick with us. And that has been used and is currently being used. I call it the weaponization of race. This weaponization of race has been used to keep the Black community boxed in and on a leash for particular causes. So one of those causes today is sexuality. The entire sexual agenda, including the transgender agenda, comes under the rubric of inclusion.
Okay.
And what's being done is they're attaching uh, sexual conduct into a relationship to being Black, so that you if you're opposed to transgender policies, then that means you're a racist.
Mm.
And this gets confusing in its application, but that's exactly what it's meant to do.
Okay. I understand that Indiana is a red state. Um, well, to a large extent. I want to ask a personal question. Please forgive my accent. But how do you respond to accusation of being called Uncle Tom? How do you handle that? Because you are a Black man and you are Republican. How did you become a Republican when you are a Black man?
Well, first of all, I'm a man, and
Okay.
I'm an independent man. I was raised by a strong father uh, and mother, as a matter of fact, and so it's necessary to learn to stand for what you believe in. And I'm a Republican. I'll tell you how that started. Because my father was more of an independent and was a Democrat for a number of years, but voted as an independent. Um, but when he was a Democrat, they were conservative Democrats. He was a Kennedy Democrat, and Democrats back in the 1960s were conservative.
Okay.
You had conservatives and liberals within the same party. You had conservative Republicans and liberal Republicans. We don't have that anymore. But I was brought up to think for myself. And when I was in high school, Jimmy Carter was president. And
Okay.
I thought Jimmy Carter did a horrible job. I thought he was a good man, but he was a lousy president. The spirit in America was down. I remember we didn't go to the Moscow Olympics. Gasoline was outrageous. We had hostages in Iran. I mean, everything was just awful. And so when Ronald Reagan ran for president and won, the difference in America was a night and day thing. I mean, he was like he was literally like a shining light over the city. And that was when I was coming to age politically. That was when I had the first opportunity to vote. And so throughout the 80s and the Reagan presidency and then the Bush presidency, I saw policies on both sides and was able to make decisions and weigh decisions on what I thought was appropriate. And so from the very beginning, I had a more conservative viewpoint, and a viewpoint that uh, allowed me to be an independent thinker, and that's what I think people need to be. One of the things that I can't stand. Um, Sometimes I hear Republicans say, "Well, we're the party of Lincoln," and they expect by saying we're the party of Lincoln, they expect the Black community to just click their heels and come along. Oh well, Lincoln freed the states. Lincoln freed the states slaves. We're the party of Lincoln. Surely you just want to come with us. Well, that's not good enough. It's not about what Lincoln did. It's about what we're doing today, and it's not about pandering. It's about demonstrating how our conservative policies are beneficial to the family and what we're doing to promote and keep the families together. What are we doing to promote marriage? What are we doing to promote families? When we're out advocating for transgender policies that allow biological men to identify as women and then compete against biological women and win, that's not promoting family values.
Well, I mean, I'm really enjoying this discussion. Thank you so much. Okay, let me take a break. We have our sponsors, like Aim Investments. Like Aim Investments are the ones that have made it possible for us to be able to have this. They very recently even put us on Twitter. So now we're broadcasting on Twitter. So we're very grateful to like Aim Investment. Lakim Investment have a shortlet facility in Lagos, in Ikorodu, Lagos. So if you're in Ikorodu, Lagos, you need a place to stay, please get in touch with Lakim Investment. You'll see the video in a moment, and then you just call the number. And or if you plan to visit Lagos, maybe you're outside the country, you plan to visit Lagos, please do business with Lakim Investment. Ikorodu is on the outskirts of Lagos, but it also it's very close to the island. So from Ikorodu, you can take a ferry and just go to the island and do your business and be back. Okay, so Lakim Investment, please do business with them. In a moment, the advert will come while we allow our guests to grab a cup of water. My rear stream is it's taking forever to bring out the video. Okay, if you're just joining us, today we have on as our guest Curtis Hill from the United States. He's the 43rd Attorney General of the state of Indiana. He has come here to tell us why Kamala Harris should not and cannot be elected president. And he's actually speaking to a Nigerian or an African audience, predominantly African audience. My next question for you, sir, is concerning Donald Trump. Now, a lot of Africans are critical of him. They said that in his first term in the office, Trump did very little for Africa. And so my question now is are there some things that we can point to that Trump did in his 4 years as president in Africa? And in this coming election, what are his international policies and how could it benefit Africa? I understand that we're not voting. You know, our voice doesn't count, but I mean, we could give him some moral support. So, what does Trump have for Africans?
Well, and you have to excuse me. Some of what you said I lost in the transmission, but in terms of specifically what Trump has done for nations around the globe, including Africa, I don't have the specific listing. What I can say is, from an international standpoint, I'll give an example. Trump says does what he says he will do, and with regard whether that's with Africa, with China, with Korea, with Israel, and in particular, I'll highlight what he did in Israel. I've been to Israel. It's a fascinating opportunity. Anyone who has the opportunity should go and see on the ground for themselves. But when I was in Israel several years ago, one of the things that we heard from officials there is that they wanted the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. For years and years and years, occupants of the White House had promised to be listening to the voices of the Jewish people and what they wanted, and they continue to be ignored. Well, President Trump told the Israelis that he would move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He proposed to do so, and members of his own administration said, "No, don't do it. You're going to destabilize the Middle East." And Trump had the good sense to go forward. I mean, and do it anyway. And it's been an excellent move, and it was a move that certainly solidified the relationship between the United States and Israel. Now we move forward, and we see the situation now where Israel is involved in a battle against Hezbollah and Hamas as a result of the October 7th last year invasion into Israel, and we're getting a mixed signals from the current administration in terms of Israeli policy. And when it comes to Kamala Harris, you're not even getting a mixed signal. Kamala Harris is giving a very bold signal that she is anti-Israel. She refused to be present for the Israeli Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C. And his address of Congress. She was off campaigning someplace. That's incredible that she would forego an opportunity to demonstrate a support for Israel when the Prime Minister was here at the Capitol addressing Congress, particularly in her capacity. And as I say, she has not demonstrated what I consider to be the appropriate level of support for the Israeli government in what they're doing to fight terrorism and their right to exist.
When Trump spoke, when he was in office, the president of Nigeria, that is the former president, President Buhari, visited the United States, and it's on record that Trump asked him, said, "I hear you are killing Christians in Nigeria. Why are you killing Christians?" You know,
I need to interrupt you for a second. I'm not picking up everything you're saying.
Okay.
If you can speak up or speak slower, I don't know if it's the system, but
Okay, can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes, that's better.
All right. So when Trump was in office, our president, the president of Nigeria then was President Buhari, and then he visited the White House, and the first thing Trump said to him when he saw him was, he said, "Why are you killing killing Christians in Nigeria?" You know, and Buhari was like, "No, we are not killing Christians," but Trump was referring to the persecution of Christians in northern Nigeria. You know, the sense that I get from the Trump presidency is that they actually wish for countries to be empowered and countries to do the right thing. For example, imitate American democracy, American free enterprise, you know, and hard work, rather than countries waiting for America to hand out, gifts and things to them. You know, that's what I think. Well, what do you think about that?
So why would I prefer someone that would use the National Guard?
Okay. Okay. I'm going to remove my mic now and speak directly to the.
How is it now? Is it better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Because I suspect. So let me increase the volume of my system. All right. So when Trump was in office, are you hearing me, sir?
Yes, I got you now.
All right. So when Trump was in office, the president of Nigeria then was President Buhari. So Buhari visited the White House, and he said to Trump confronted him and said, "Why are you killing Christians?" And when Trump said that, his reference was actually referencing the fact that Christians were being killed and persecuted, what they call it, Islamic insurgents were killing and persecuting Christians in northern Nigeria. So he asked him, why are you killing Christians? And Buhari was taken off guard, before he responded and said that. So from that, I get the thinking or the instinct that the Republican Party probably prefers that countries around the world are empowered rather than they being given gifts or given gifts and doled out money, but that rather they should imitate the American democracy, imitate the American free enterprise, and so on, and make themselves great, rather than having to wait for a big brother to hand out things to them. So that's the thinking that I have with regards to the Republicans. Do you agree with me or not?
I do agree with you. I think that's exactly right. I think also Trump represents the idea that nations take care of their own business from an international standpoint. If you remember, Trump was very, very direct with our allies in saying that our allies need to stand up and share the responsibility of funding freedom across the world. Much of the sorry, we're getting a little back.
I can hear you, sir. Can you go on, sir?
I'm getting some back to you.
Yes, that's the reason why I use the mic. Sometimes the noise from outside, my children just keep running around. So, well, you can go on. I'll speak to them and tell them to reduce the noise.
Well, my point is that Trump has a reputation for speaking his mind, speaking the truth in terms of what people are doing, and I think that's important to the world.
Okay. All right. The next question that I have here actually has to do with the Russian-Ukraine war. The world is concerned about that war. The crisis has gone on for too long. America has been supporting Ukraine. What are President Trump's policies? What do you think he plans to do to bring a quick end to that crisis? Because that concerns us.
I certainly don't know for sure, but based on what he has said and his past performance, I think he would rely very heavily on his relationships on the international stage. He holds himself out to have a solid relationship with Vladimir Putin, a solid relationship with Ukraine. I believe that he plans to use those relationships to, as he would say, create a deal. I've not seen Donald Trump look at an event yet without recognizing the deal that can be made between that. He has a unique understanding of what it takes to get something accomplished, and I'm not just saying that in the wind. That's based on what he did from 2016 to 2020 when he was president. He had opportunity after opportunity to engage on the international stage, and was very, very successful in the policies that he espoused and the actions that he took. So I think he's going to rely very heavily on the relationships that he's developed on an international basis. What's interesting about Trump is he doesn't find himself pigeonholed or locked into past relationships. An example of this is the relationship that he managed with North Korea. Prior to Trump, the standard protocol for relationships between the United States government and North Korea was that you couldn't participate in a dialogue that was outside of the six-way talks. You had to have this complex process so that it didn't appear that the United States was directly communicating with North Korea. Well, Trump blew that all to heck, and not only directly communicated with North Korea, he actually went to North Korea and stepped across the line. Very courageous move, very smart move, and sure, the leader of North Korea is someone that we don't have a great deal of respect for, but it's someone that we have to deal with, and you can't deal with anybody unless you have some kind of communication line. Trump had that communication line, and the world was at peace during his tenure.
So interestingly, Trump is being compared to Hitler, but in his 4 years in office, Trump did not start any war. Rather, he tried to create relationship with Putin and even North Korea. So we're hoping that somehow he'll find the wisdom to solve the crisis in Eastern Europe. Okay, so yes.
Trump doesn't like to say things in the most articulate manner. He's not a politician. He's a straightforward speaker. So sometimes he says things that are misunderstood or perhaps even clumsy. But you have to take a look at the measure of what he got accomplished. There's many people who don't like certain things that he says or how he says them. But when you take a look at what he was able to accomplish during his time in office, 4 years ago, gasoline was less than $2 a gallon. The mortgage interest rates on financing a house was less than 2%. The border was completely sealed, and we had nobody coming across the border from an illegal standpoint. Biden and Harris changed that almost overnight, and since then we've had a flood of millions and millions of undocumented individuals across our southern border. So the results are there from an economic standpoint and from a liberty standpoint.
All right. Okay. As we bring the program to a close, I would like to know what your plans are for your own political future. You ran to be governor of Indiana State this year, 2024. But I do not know, and especially considering your age at 63, do you still plan to run for office, sir?
Well, I've enjoyed public service. I think we were good at it in terms of listening and doing the types of things that were necessary to push a conservative agenda. I don't have any immediate plans to engage in public service. I was fortunate to be prosecutor for a number of years, attorney general for my state. I ran for governor. It was a crowded field, and we weren't successful, but we did get a lot of our messaging across. So there may be something in the future. Right now, I'm participating in events and conferences. I'll be speaking at a conference tomorrow and Friday in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the things that I'll be talking about is it time to eliminate the protected class status and get back to equal justice under the law? Things that I think are important for our generation and for our generations to come.
All right. Thank you very much, Curtis, for being our guest on Reform Nigeria Television. We hope that if we ask you to come again to speak on things that pertain to the United States, you will heed our invitation. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So this has been Reform Nigeria Television. My name is Deji Pastor, Providence Reform Baptist Church. We have our local church at the University of Ibadan. If you want to know more about our church, please send me an email at newdgx@gmail.com. I am also the author of this wonderful book, Humanity. As we talk about, in the book, I have a collection of 101 of my articles that I wrote over a 10-year period. So if you want a copy, please get in touch with, go to Amazon, you'll find it, or you can get in touch with me and I'll get a copy over to you at a very, very good price. All right. My website is textandpublishing.com. I've said it earlier on. Lakim is our sponsors. Please patronize them, do business with them, and we'll also be able to stay online. On Saturday, we're having Dr. Motorayo Adetola come to debate Reverend Father Imba Eri on the question of the Apocrypha in Scriptures. So please make the date with us, 7 p.m. on Saturday. Thank you very much again, Curtis, for being our guest, and we wish you a good afternoon rest or good night rest. And please extend our greetings to your family, your local church, and to your constituency. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I'll bring the stream to an end and then say goodbye.